Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we are returning to War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition, my Let's Play series against Hartwig. I always have to think who I'm actually playing at this point in time when we get started. We are doing the May 3rd combat resolution, and then we'll be looking at the May 4th turn. You can see here our troops are continuing to land at Savi. We have almost the entire regiment of Marines. I believe the 8th Marine Regiment is ashore at Savi. Meanwhile, we have some submarine activity going on here off the northeast coast of Japan here. Some Japanese escorts are depth charging the USS Haddock here, and it looks like they're detonating above the sub, so or maybe some near misses, but either way I think they're doing okay. Yep, no hits on that sub in that resolution. We also have another ASW patrol here off the coast of Vietnam against the Gato. It's in deeper waters, so it should be okay, and it is. So she survived without too much damage. And then another attack against the Haddock. What's the state of the war? Have we won decisively? Ahead minor, ahead tied Morindia. I would say we're behind in some areas, so we're definitely behind in the South Pacific. The Japanese have taken Espiritu Santos as well as New Caledonia. We are in the process of counterattacking at Savi. We've landed a Marine regiment there, and hopefully we will take the base this turn. Meanwhile, we can see the Japanese put a submarine into Savi against our invasion force there. The Le Triomphant is depth charging here and claims 5 hits there. That's a pretty considerable amount of depth charge hits there, if true. And so in the South Pacific we're behind. In the Dutch East Indies we're holding on, and it is May, so things are going pretty well there. I would say close to historical, maybe a little bit better than historical, certainly better than most people when they play the game. In Burma we're way ahead. The Japanese have, they got a foothold at Molmain. We retook Molmain. The Japanese haven't made almost any progress in Burma at all, so in terms of the India-Burma theater we're doing much better than reality. And China's going okay. We've lost Changsha, but that's hard to measure against history because usually good Japanese players roll China pretty quick, and that has not yet happened in this game. We've put up a pretty good fight so far in China. Japanese battleships are bombarding Batavia, the last holdout in the Dutch East Indies. You can see at least 2 battleships and a heavy cruiser there. Looks like they did some damage to the aircraft that are on the ground there at the base. Some damage to some B-17s which are there. I think we've got like 6 left, so that kind of sucks. Also 2 DO-24Ks and some Mitchell photo reconnaissance aircraft damaged by the 2 battleships and 2 heavy cruiser bombardment. Meanwhile, the Allied cruiser bombardment at Savi, just before our infantry assault this turn here, we've got the heavy cruiser Australia, Chicago, and several other ships here you can see laying down some fire. 4 heavy cruisers, a light and a destroyer. 15 Japanese casualties inflicted against the defenders there, as well as some runway hits, port hits, and port supply hits. So good news there. Allied ships are also bombarding the Japanese on Midway Island. I believe we destroyed a support unit there last turn before the battleships started switching their bombardments to the base itself. You can see our heavy cruisers are back in action at Midway here, and they do inflict 131 casualties, 10 squads disabled of combat troops from those 4 heavy cruisers, and then they also hit the port, runway, and airbase supply a little bit, so that's all good. It looks like they're actually hitting the defensive unit there, so that's good to see. That probably does it for the nighttime phase. I'm assuming, yep, we're going to move into the air phase here. So you can see Louisville is bombarding Savi as we continue to unload more troops. No damage to the troops there. And the Silversides fire some torpedoes on a patrol boat off the coast of Japan to no real effect. Japanese I-23 at Pago Pago. So we did some good ASW work at Savi. Looks like they also put a sub into Pago Pago, and our destroyers are hitting them there. Pretty good results there also by the destroyer Encounter. It looks like 8 hits against the I-23, and the Silver... Woo! Boys, the Mark 14 working! Silversides off the coast of Japan, just to the west of Hokkaido, put 2 torpedoes into the Yonyama Maru, 2 torpedo hits on fire, heavy damage, can't remember the last time we sank a ship with a submarine, but pretty sure that Japanese merchant ship is going down. Mark 14 works. Yep, we get the little gurgly sound effect, which means something sunk. And presumably it was the ship that we just torpedoed. So we've done very little damage to the Japanese merchant marine so far in this war. So any ship sunk is a welcome event. Meanwhile, we've got Japanese Oscars flying over Rangoon here. We also have Japanese Oscars flying over Chongqing. So we thought last turn maybe they were preparing for an air attack here. Meanwhile, just a quick aside here, it looks like we've got 2 P-40Es going to battle against 20 Japanese fighters, 13 Oscars, 7 Zeros, and then 19 Lilies coming into bomb. Looked like they damaged one of the P-40s here. We hit one of the Sallies with flak, and we didn't lose anything there from those fighters. So those guys scrambled, and they managed to survive 20 Japanese fighters. Meanwhile, one of those P-40s is still in the air, and it looks like a second raid is coming in with no escort here, and this individual Dutch plane is cruising through this formation. One Dutch pilot, looks like he just shot down 3 Sallies all by himself. Luckily, no Japanese escorts there, so survived 20 Japanese fighter aircraft, and then in a second raid, he came in and destroyed 1 Sally 2A and 2 Sally 1Cs, also damaging a 4th one. Pretty damn good job by that pilot. How's it possible? My guess, Marindia, is they didn't fight them. Like, I would guess on the first fighter engagement, when they saw those 20 enemy fighters, they probably ducked into a cloud bank or something and escaped. Pilots generally, if you try to get away before you engage, it's generally something you can do. Okay, so a third Japanese raid on Batavia. This one is escorted by Zeros again here. So 17 Zeros and 9 Sallies come in and drop their payloads. Our P-40s are already exhausted for the day, so must be on the ground. A further Japanese sweep of 11 Oscars coming over an empty sky. Gonna have to see who that pilot was that shot down all those aircraft once we get into the turn. Some bombing in China, some Idas, some Ans hitting Batavia as well. Ki-32 Marys. One of the things definitely we can say is the Japanese air activity over China has picked up considerably since Hartwig took over about a week ago in game terms. So he certainly is making a conscious effort to ramp up the air war in China, which is smart because that's where you can effectively use your, basically get your pilots into combat where they're not going to get shot up and killed. Meanwhile, this raid, 6 Sallies damaged by flak, 1 destroyed, so they're taking a beating a little bit there. Okay. So more sweeps, but yeah, he certainly seems to be using China as a training ground, where there isn't a whole lot of resistance. We could throw some of our fighters into China and try and surprise them, but I'm hesitant to do that. More likely, we could throw a cap over Rangoon and maybe have a favorable engagement there. China's problem is there's just not enough support to effectively maintain large combat air patrols. Meanwhile, we've got our 72 Dauntless dive bombers hitting the Japanese soldiers at Midway, so we inflicted another 28 casualties there. 1 squad disabled, 2 non-combatants. A single Dauntless was damaged. Yef23, thanks for the follow. Okay, air operations PM phase. A lot of recon going on here. Not a lot of activity in the PM phase, though. I-23 is being engaged by ASWs again at Pago. No damage there, though. And then our battleships made it to Midway this turn, and they are blasting the hell out of the base here. So we'll see if they do any damage to the Japanese defenders. They do not. For whatever reason, they're firing at the island, not at the defenders. Some runway hits, some supply hits, but not quite what I would have hoped for 3 battleships bombarding. And then another bombardment that does nothing. I-23 being attacked over near Savi again, no damage there. And that's going to pretty much wrap up the turn. We do still have the land combat phase, so we'll see what comes of anything here. Japanese bombardment at Batavia continuing with their ground forces. So far, I believe most of their naval bombardments have been targeting my engineer units, which is good. Meanwhile, a bombardment at Batavia doesn't really, like, they destroyed 3 infantry squads and disabled 1. We disabled 6. We had fewer casualties than them. Looks like they have better than 2-to-1 assault value, but we do have pretty strong fortifications there, so we might hold out if we're attacked. We've got level 4 forts, I think. Bombardment at Clark Field. Likewise, they've got about double our assault value at Clark Field, or sorry, actually we have double theirs, never mind. And they lost more than we did. And the 8th Marine Regiment is attacking the Japanese at Savi, and they took the base. So it doesn't look like we destroyed the Japanese unit there. That was pretty damn fast. We only lost 29 casualties. That's 3 squads disabled and 1 engineer disabled. The enemy lost 486 casualties, 20 infantry squads destroyed, 18 disabled. 6 non-combatants disabled, 10 guns lost, 1 of those destroyed, and so we took the base. So that pushes the Japanese defenders of the 51st Naval Guard Unit into the interior of the island. The base becomes American, and that's really, I would say, our first real counterattack. So we did land and retake, what was it, Baker Island previously, but there was, I want to say, just a base force of enemy troops there. And all we landed was a battalion of troops. Like, this is our first regimental size counterattack in the Pacific against a not totally pushover enemy force. Again, I think we inflicted like 100 casualties at Baker when we retook the island. It might have even been unoccupied. I can't remember. But we inflicted almost 500 casualties on the Japanese here and retook the base at Savi. So good sign there. Japanese units are surrounded at Savi, so again, good news there. Sydney expands fortifications to, or Karachi expands port size to 7. That's good. That'll help us pour supplies into India that much more easily. But yeah, so one of the 2 counterattack objectives is ours. The other one is Midway, and we will probably be landing there in the next day or 2, so we can get our battleships out of harm's way in case the enemy fleet comes calling. Okay, and I think that's about it. Oh, we got the San Diego, so we got another Atlanta-class light cruiser anti-aircraft cruiser. Okay. All right, so first things first, let's check Savi out. So the base that we retook from the enemy, you can see here the base is now ours. Considerable amount of port, airfield, and runway damage, which makes sense considering how much we've been bombarding the place. Very little supply there, so we do need to unload a little bit more from our transports. We've got about 1,400 there, so that shouldn't be an issue. We should continue unloading that today. Port size at Savi is 1, airfield size is 3. By the way, the other nice thing about Savi is if I do want to try and get back Canton Island as well, my goal is really to flatten out my sea lines of communication. So Canton is kind of a thorn in our side. Savi was as well. If we can take Canton and Savi, then really there's no disruption to the shipping to Australia until you get to New Caledonia and Tana here. And so you have to take a detour further south, but you don't have to do that until you get to the very end of the route to Australia. Previously, because Savi was in enemy hands, like in theory, we had to go way south in case they had float planes there. So we had to kind of keep way east with Canton also being in Japanese hands, again, in case there's float planes there. But now that we've taken Savi, that's one of the objectives of clearing out our supply lines here. If we take a look at the 8th Marines themselves, they do have 458 supply that they've currently drawn, so they're a little bit short, but not too bad. I don't think it'll affect combat results. They have 76 regular ready rifle squads 24 are suppressed. Fatigues 15, disruptions 12. Overall, it seems like they're in pretty decent shape to continue that deliberate attack and continue whittling down the Japanese forces on the island. The intelligence claims the enemy still has 2,200 soldiers with 10 guns and 0 AFVs. They've been pushed out of the island's defenses, however, and so hopefully it'll be easier to mop these guys up and finish things off in the next couple of turns at Savi. So we inflicted over 500 casualties, but another 2,000 or so are left. Meanwhile, at Midway, intel reports 2,500 enemy troops, 8 guns with 1 enemy unit. Our battleships are returning to Pearl, so these guys are getting out of the way. I don't want to leave them out there any longer. They dropped that last bombardment on the enemy, and we didn't have them withdraw to rearm or anything like that. We have also loaded up the 3rd 298th and fast transports. They're going to land at Midway this turn. In addition to that, we have also loaded up the 2nd 298th. They're going to land at Midway this turn with support of the heavy cruisers, which had been bombarding last turn. So these guys did rearm. They did use up their ops points, but they'll probably arrive in the day phase. So I think we'll have the fast transports go ashore immediately at night, and then we'll have the slower transports go ashore later in the day. They'll have supply with them as well, so they'll have heavy cruisers bombarding the enemy when they go ashore. The battleships all are returning, and there's no sign of any enemy ships around here, but I just don't like the idea of sitting at one island for a week plus. That seems to be inviting bad things. Meanwhile, we also have a 109th USN base force, which will go ashore at Midway to support the troops there. This base force consists of, what do they consist of? Some heavy stuff, but they also have some rifle squads. So they have 10 rifle squads. They've got a small infantry section here. They have some anti-aircraft guns. They've got radar. They've got engineers, engineer vehicles, and aviation support for when Midway is retaken. They're not like the most effective combat unit, but they have some use and utility there. In addition to them, we also have the 1st 298th Infantry Battalion, which is coming up to Midway as well. 3 and 3, so they will get to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So in the day phase, they should get to Midway as well. Not sure if they'll start unloading or not, but hopefully they do. Intel claims that the airfield is completely destroyed, with the port as well at almost 80% damage. But I'm a little annoyed that we haven't been bombarding the troops as much as I would like, other than the engineer unit, which we wiped out. It does feel like we should have accomplished a little bit more with those battleships laying waste to the island. Everything but the troops, I guess. Meanwhile, if we go back to Batavia here, we can take a look at the P-40 squadron. These guys had two planes scramble. They have 3 damaged, being repaired. Only 1 is currently serviceable. 2 more will be finished today. So we could get up to 3 aircraft by the end of the day tomorrow. If we take a look at the pilots here, I believe Van Harlem is the individual who won all those air battles here. You can see he has 7 kills to his name, 74 experience, and 67 air. This guy has definitely earned his keep, if you will. But you can see he gained some experience last turn. We can actually take a look here. I believe if we go to the operations report. Yeah, so we've got Flight Officer Van Harlem is credited with kill number 5. He became an ace, credited with kill number 6, credited with kill number 7. So he is the one Dutch pilot who, fought heroically at Batavia this turn, survived the initial encounter with 20 enemy fighters, and then bounced an enemy bomber formation of over 20 bombers, shooting down at least 3 and perhaps damaging 1 more. So if we take a look at the air losses this turn, the Japanese lost 13. We only lost 3. The enemy lost 3 Sally 2As, 3 Sally 1Cs, 2 Top Cs, 2 Lils, and then a An, a Val, and a 0. We lost 1 DC-2, which was an operational loss. We lost 1 P-40, which was an operational loss, and 1 Mitchell photo reconnaissance plane. If we take a look at the other aircraft on the ground at Batavia, the B-17s, well, doesn't look like any of them are going to be ready at the moment. It looks like we've got 2 more left on the base for the 30th and 435th Bomber Squadrons. So not quite as many as I thought. That's good news. We have been pulling them out of the Dutch East Indies into Mandalay, where we have now gotten 28 B-17s to Mandalay. And I think we might have one squadron also at Chittagong. Yep, we got another 8 there. So we've got about 36 B-17s in eastern India and also in Burma. Not enough to really do a ton, but still it's nice to have. We also had our first transports arrive at Rangoon a little while, and they are unloading their supply. One of them is already completed. The other 2 are at about 37% left. But over 3,000 supply points have been unloaded this turn with some light cargo ships that came in. Could we use float planes in Batavia to try and hit the BBs? What do we even have? We got how many? 3 DO-24 float planes. I don't think they carry the torpedoes or anything. They just have 300 kilogram SAP bombs, so they probably wouldn't do a whole lot to the Japanese battleships. We do have some Catalinas, but those also only carry bombs. These are the Dutch Catalinas, not the American ones, so the torpedo loadout isn't an option. And then we've got the one Hurricane squadron that actually has 1 aircraft ready. So they have 1 plane ready. We could swap that squadron out with some B-339-23 Buffaloes if we really wanted to get them back up to full strength. But I don't think we'll do that. I think once the squadron is depleted, we'll just withdraw it. They'll come back in like 90 days or something like that at a different base. Have any sign of the Japanese carriers? Some heavy cruisers there. This may be a battleship formation with heavy cruisers moving northeast. And we're claiming at least some carriers are still in port at Singapore. Meanwhile, nothing new in China. I wouldn't say Dutch submarines were the only good Allied submarines for a long time, Stars. The Americans had some really good subs. They didn't have good torpedoes. Are the Dutch forces even capable of doing anything? Well, we shot down 3 enemy bombers with them. Yeah, I mean, they're capable to a point. Their main issue comes down to their pools are really small, so they don't have a lot of replacements. And then they also are typically suffering from low morale. So these soldiers here at Batavia have been holding out for a bit. We actually have 38,000 supply. We've got about just shy of 1,100 assault value for the troops there. These guys, the 52 experience isn't great. It's not the worst in the world, but it's not great. But their morale is high, so their disruption is low. Third, KINL AA unit actually has a fair bit of disruption at 15. The highest disruption appears to be the Batavia Coastal Gun Battalion here with 120 millimeter coastal guns. 2 of them are disabled out of 9. I'm guessing they originally had 10 and 1 was destroyed. These guys have 73 disruption. Fortunately, they have very few soldiers here. They do have some militia squads, 41 of which are disabled. Yeah, most of these guys have pretty good morale. Sebastian, if you're curious about the Dutch, I would look into the Battle of the Java Sea. There were some interesting contestants there. All right, so well, he hit Batavia a bunch. I didn't even see. Is the runway still operational? Oh yeah, barely any damage. Okay, and then if we go to the intelligence and ship sunk screen and we go to last turn, You'll see we claim the Yonya Maru, 10 victory points to a Mark 14, the best torpedo in the world. She carries 2,600 cargo, 370 troops, and has a maximum speed of 12 knots. Decent cargo ship to have sunk. So let's see. Calcutta. All right. Carrier should be on map in a few days. 8 more days until the Illustrious is on the map for us. Headed to Bombay, where our other carriers are. Let's also take a look at the Hornet here and see. So she's been hitting Midway pretty regularly. Okay. All right, still about half of the available remaining sorties, so Hornet's going to need to withdraw shortly as well, but we'll keep her in position for one more turn to bomb the troops as the soldiers go ashore, so we don't send troops ashore to Midway without any support. I'm a little nervous about the Midway operation, truth be told. We've got about a regiment, or not a about a regiment, about an independent regiment worth of troops going in. A little bit on the lighter side of equipment. And while the enemy only has one guard unit there, our bombardments have not been as effective as they were at Savi, and the enemy themselves seem to be in much better shape, perhaps, than the troops at Savi were, because Savi was always kind of dubious for the Japanese to try and supply. That's probably not the case, I don't think, with Midway, but I guess we'll see. Is this versus the AI? No, Yuff. We are playing Hartwig, who is a 14-year War in the Pacific veteran. Ship availability. Got a couple of cargo ships coming in next turn. I think we saw the San Diego arrive, right? Yeah, we did. So we've got our second Atlanta-class cruiser here, which just arrived near the Panama Canal, and with her massive complement of anti-aircraft guns. No, gentle. He's been playing War in the Pacific for 14 years. He's not 14. Does he prefer to play as Japan? Actually, Sebastian Hartwig is usually an allied player. He decided to play this game as Japan to get a little bit of experience and just, try something different. Yes, the Japanese side is definitely harder to win. The game is very, you don't get extra ships versus what history had. So when it comes to 44, the Allies are like cruising out huge numbers of ships. And the Japanese just aren't comparatively. Okay. Is there anything we want to look at in this turn? I mean, we already looked at the operational losses and aircraft losses. We looked at the different bases. Speaking of which, how's the supply situation here? I know it's terrible, but 20. And then, yeah. Yeah, it's starting to get desperate. Desperation Island in the Philippines. Supplies are in rough shape. What are the planes or the plans? The planes at Pago haven't changed lately. We've got a couple of squadron of Dauntlesses, a P-40 group, a Marauder squadron, and an A-20 Havoc squadron. But yeah, so what I was saying earlier is I do want to retake Canton. It's 18 hexes from Pago, which is actually too far out for even our B-17s to, without a bigger airfield, without them being able to do much at 18 hexes. That's the extended radius, and you don't get that unless your airfield is a certain size. So it limits our ability to get good intel or recon on Canton. But the good news is with Savi, because it's further north, it's actually only 16 hexes, which then pulls it inside the range of the B-17 to effectively get to, I guess it's actually still extended range, but 18 hexes she can get there. At least for some intel or other things like that. Turn the planes at Pago to ASW for easy sub damage. I don't know. I'll consider it. With that being said, I'm not sure I have a lot else to show you guys today. Anything else you want to see before we wrap the stream up? Like I said, a bit of a short stream today. Just wanted to get the turnout. But I'm not sure there's anything else to show. We got the 4,500 supply unloading there. Got another 13,000 coming down from Calcutta up here. So yeah, I think that's going to do it, guys. Thanks for coming out for another episode of War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition. Each turn is 1 day. We're India. So this is May 4th. Next turn will be May 5th. You can play in up to 3-day turn increments, I believe. But things happen so fast. These maps are so large. Units can move a considerable distance in 1 day, let alone 3. So it's I like the 1 day turns. What game mechanisms make it a dumb idea to send an aircraft group to Japan? Well, aircraft only have a certain amount of range. We can't really get there in the first place. They presumably have a lot of fighter aircraft at Japan to shoot down any incoming aircraft. And we don't have a base to stage out of, so there's that. Oh. Well, I mean, they've got Bettys and Nells, very good, experienced torpedo bombers. And their home defenses will probably overwhelm our bombers and fighters anyway. There's no real place to retreat to if you lose early game anyway. Your up front carriers, like there's nowhere to retreat to if the enemy attacks your carriers on your raid to Japan. You know, you've got just a vast expanse of ocean, and if you're damaged, you can take additional damage from the sea if you try and, you know, move at a high speed when you're flooding. So that can make, you know, a damaged task force even more vulnerable if it tries to escape. Additionally, fuel makes such a sally pretty difficult in the first place. You'd have to bring along a good number of tankers to keep things going. And the Allies have a shortage of those early in the war. Also, yeah, it takes a lot of supplies and fuel to get all the way out there for all that risk. And your carrier bombers aren't going to accomplish much in just a couple of days off the coast of Japan in terms of industry damage. No way to do a Doolittle raid as far as I'm aware. I don't think you can put B-25s on carriers. You could do it with the aircraft carriers. You couldn't do it with the aircraft. Yeah, it's very detailed, more India. So, like, just as an example, Palembang here. We click on it. We can see it provides the occupier with 900 oil per turn. Actually, I want to say it's like 1,300 fuel per turn. It has a refinery that refines about 1,000 oil per turn. So, all of your resources to run the Japanese economy are on map. And while the Allied industry is largely abstracted, the Japanese are not. So the Japanese player actually has to build a whole slew of things. You can see here in the production menu or the pool menu all the different types of units, and then their number of units in the pool, number of units used so far, produced last turn this month, the build rate per month or the reinforcement rate per month. The Japanese actually have to manage this. They have to manage building engines for their aircraft, airframes for their aircraft, and you can't finish an aircraft if you don't have an engine for it. There's a whole bunch of things you have to do. The Allies are mostly just more about moving around finished goods or equipment, because so much of the industry for the Allies is off map. But with that being said, that's where we're going to wrap things up here today. So we have a Dutch pilot who's a hero. We have the Marines retaking Savi and bottling the Japanese up on the island. And we have the invasion of Midway about to kick off. That'll all be for next time, however. Until then, this is the Historical Gamer saying once again, as always, thank you for watching, and I'm out.